he is destined to take a giant stride into history, Colonel John H. Glenn, Jr. squeezes into his spacesuit. His smiling face belies the 10 postponements of his flight that have kept him grounded. This morning, the weather over Cape Canaveral and in the pickup areas is better, and there's an air of optimism as the Colonel walks to the gantry elevator. Carrying his now familiar portable air conditioner, Glenn prepares to go to the 11th deck as clocks point to 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. The skies are beginning to lighten, and a cool north wind rustles across the Cape. The Colonel's date with destiny comes 10 months after the Russians claimed an orbital flight by Yuri Gagarin, and less than a year after Alan Shepard blazed a suborbital trail for the U.S. This is the climax of 3 years of training. This is the moment when the eyes of the world turn to Cape Canaveral. The Russian orbits were in a thick fog of secrecy. The United States stands or falls in the white-hot glare of worldwide publicity. In the capsule atop the Atlas missile, the Colonel will be strapped to a contoured couch. Once in flight, the Mercury will be tilted so that the astronaut will ride backwards. The seconds tick off as his rendezvous with space approaches. The hatch cover causes a slight delay when a defective bolt is discovered. Then, millions are moved to silent prayer. Everything is go. The takeoff of the Atlas, blasted aloft by 360,000 pounds of thrust, carries the Mercury gracefully skyward. The Friendship 7, climbing rapidly out of the Earth's atmosphere, exerts a pressure of 6 times the force of gravity on the astronaut. Loud and clear, he reports back to Mercury Control, reading off his instruments, commenting on his reactions, all as coolly and calmly as if he was commuting on the 827. Glenn is able to control the yaw and pitch of the vehicle himself. Now comes the moment when the Mercury is turned so that Glenn will be seated facing backwards. He checks with ground control.
Roger, 0G, and I feel fine. Capsule is turning around. Oh, that view is tremendous. Roger, turnaround has started. Capsule turning around, and I could see the booster during turnaround just a couple of 100 yards behind me. It was beautiful. Roger, 7. You have a go, at least 7 orbits. Roger, understand go for at least 7 orbits.
Actual pictures of Glenn in the capsule will give scientists the opportunity to study his reactions as he passes over the Canary Islands, Africa, the Indian Ocean, Australia, back across the Pacific and over the United States. He speeds at 17,500 miles an hour, reaching a high point of 160 miles and a low altitude of 99 miles. Each of the 3 orbits takes about 90 minutes.
Okay, sorry folks. Time got away from me, and I am still trying to set up a bunch of stuff that we want to dive into. And apparently, as I do that, I'm probably messing up the play of this video. I'm not sure. Were you able to see what was on the screen, Louis? Was it going to a bunch of different things?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. It's and my computer's kind of freaking out because I have so many windows open as well.
It's just
we're trying a whole new framework here, and we are presenting ourselves, as you can see. I'm trying to get Louis in frame here. So we're I guess whoever's watching right now is kind of we're testing all this out on you guys.
It's been one of those weeks.
Oh man, we're gonna get into that too. Okay, it doesn't like that. There we go. There you are. People should be seeing you now. Cool, that's working. So, you know, I put together this new framework. Still figuring some things out. Wanted to get the chat incorporated into the final vids, so that seems to be working. Yeah, we'll just keep tinkering until we get this right. And we're still not sure if my little computer can handle all of this. But hey, we're going to give it a shot. As you can see, I do not like green eggs and cam. This is something I've been debating about doing. I didn't even own a webcam. So I went out and bought one, and after I ran out of excuses about why not to use one, here we are. So I guess I understand from a perspective of, you know, this is a truth community, and I've always used my real name. Ty Gorton's my real name. But several people have said that Flat Revival kind of needs a face. So here we are.
It's a lot harder than people may imagine.
Yeah, all of this is. It's been I think it's been a, you know, kind of a baby step process. It's kind of like, I didn't think I would do one thing like social media, and then I didn't think I would do any kind of YouTube thing, whether it was behind a camera or not. And you just kind of incrementally step it forward. And Flat Earth has this way of saying, yeah, you can do that, you should do that.
Well, and you know, with the group we're dealing with, if we didn't do it eventually, there'd be some conspiracy theory about us.
Yeah, right. Like, why don't they want to be?
Who are
want
they?
to show themselves? Which I think in my case is kind of irrelevant because, like I said, I've always used my real name online. Well, mostly. I think when the internet first got going, I used Twisted Spine was my name. I was kind of gothic and really into that stuff, so I started out with that, but not long. Once I started trying to get into comics and writing and publishing, I switched to my real name, and I haven't used anything since. So anyone who does a search for Ty Gorton online is going to find all kinds of stuff, and I'm sure my photos all over the place. Wanted to share this. Flat Earth Butler posted a photo of himself with Flat Revival, issue #1. Really cool. Thanks for doing that.
Very cool.
Yeah, and you know, I hope to see a lot more. We actually want to put on a contest, and you know, who can come up with the most clever way of photographing the magazine in the real world, either with themselves. They don't have to be in the photo, but just something maybe humorous or interesting, or putting it in an odd place. You know, I think it could be a lot of fun.
I should have sent you. Oh, I did send you the one. We should have got the one with me holding the first copy that I received.
Yes, I think I was actually going to use that for this, but then today when I logged into Twitter, this was like the first post I saw. So I was just like, oh, cool, and I grabbed it. But it does lead me into an issue, the issue we're having with Flat Revival #1 right now with Createspace. There was a couple of small edits that just had to be made in an article, and I made a judgment call as the publisher, thinking, you know, this thing's already been accepted. It's already it's already passed the Createspace test. I'm not changing any design component. It was just some words in the body of an article. So I resubmitted it. This was Wednesday, and then it came back rejected on Thursday, which really blew my mind, seeing as I'm sitting there looking at a copy of it. I can hold it in my hands. It's already been printed. You know, a bunch of them have been sold. So it didn't, you know, I couldn't figure it out, and we're still, it's still going on. I've moved they say that the margins aren't right. I've moved the margins in even further than their requirements suggest, just to be safe, to be certain, and it's still being rejected. Now, this ties into, oddly enough, it ties into the topic that we want to get into, which is when math trumps reality, we have a problem. And I think what's going on with Createspace is, and this is kind of complicated, but when I PDF the document from InDesign, it's supposed to be 8.125 inches wide by 10.25 inches tall. And that's exactly what it is. It's set to that. But if you open the PDF and look at the document in Acrobat, the properties are telling you that it's 8.13 inches wide, which isn't right. And the thing is Acrobat, for whatever reason, when there's more than two numbers after the decimal point, it's rounding it. Now I've tried tricking it, trying to get it to exactly 1.25, because my theory is that Createspace is almost all automated. It's an automated system.
It's gotta be.
I don't think there's a human being really looking at this thing. So the system is saying it's 8.13. But it isn't. It's not reality. If you were to drop that file into Photoshop, it would be 8.125. It would be correct. So this is I feel like it's an instance where math, the numbers, are trumping reality. It might be a little bit of a stretch, but I felt it was kind of a real world example of why this is a problem. Because there's almost, I don't know what to do at this point. I can't, you try calling Createspace, and yeah, I can talk to someone in India, but they have no authority to do anything. All they can tell me is that they're going to forward the info to technical services. I can't talk to a real person that actually has any authority to do anything about it. And it's like, it's already printed, it's already been accepted. I just want to say, print it. And if you need me to sign a waiver and agree that if there's a problem, it's my fault, fine. But you can't. Createspace, it doesn't have the human element. If we were dealing with a real printer, this wouldn't. It's a non-issue. There's no problem. There's nothing wrong with the print document. Anyone holding the magazine, anyone who's received their copy knows this. So
I mean, it just shows, yeah, like math. I mean, it can't take into account judgment, you know.
exactly. It
I mean,
removes the human equation. It removes the ability to look beyond the numbers at what is really going on, at what is really there. And I honestly believe this is what's going on. I
right.
can't think of any other thing it could possibly be. So, that drops us into this discussion I want to have about math. And we all know that scientism, astrophysics, theoretical physics today is all about presenting us with mathematical equations that we're supposed to accept as reality. And any flat earther, anyone who's been in this knows 100% that it's just not so. They can present us with equations that quote unquote work, they balance out. But it doesn't mean it has anything to do with the reality we live in. And, that's just what it is. And I have a bunch of stuff I want to share with you guys. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get it all set up in here. So as we try to go, I want to dive into it. So as we go to each one, what I want to, I'm going to have to probably set some things up, and there might be some interruptions as we go, but that's okay. I think people understand. That's how it goes sometimes.
Yeah, it's gonna be what it's gonna be.
Okay. Good. So it'll just be, as I have to pull up each thing, there's going to be probably some moments where you're looking at something funky. This is an article, Is Mathematics an Effective Way to Describe the World? Gotta move Louie over here. Oh, yes. There's this term that constantly pops up when you're reading anything about this idea about math representing reality. It has to do with Plato. It's Platonism. And I have a little definition here that I want to pop up. So Platonism is firstly the philosophy of Plato or his followers. But the important definition is the second one. The theory that numbers or other abstract objects are objective, timeless entities, independent of the physical world and the symbols used to represent them. So this question constantly arises with this topic, and it's an endless topic. It's really huge. We're barely going to scratch the surface. But there's this question of, did math exist? Did math always exist and we've discovered it, or have human beings invented math? And,
right.
That's, and it's one of those circular arguments. It can be argued both sides, and nobody really has an answer to that question ultimately. But it's important that we understand where they're coming from here. With the definition of that word, and I kind of knew what it meant, but I wasn't sure, so I wanted to share it. Let's see here. Oh yeah, this is a good article. Let me get here to the top. There's a couple I didn't want to read the whole thing. Just kind of wanted to get into the. Here we go.
Is this the Forbes magazine or article?
I think this one is on phys.org. It's a it's a science website. I've kind of before I was into flat Earth, I'd hit it all the time, and now I kind of just hit it for comic relief. It's really, reading people's comments is especially good about the outer space stuff. It's like, oh man, these people take this stuff really serious. So mathematics has been called the language of the universe. Scientists and engineers often speak of the elegance of mathematics when describing physical reality, citing examples such as pi e = mc squared, and even something as simple as using abstract integers to count real-world objects. Yet while these examples demonstrate how useful math can be for us, does it mean that the physical world naturally follows the rules of mathematics as its mother tongue, and that this mathematics has its own existence that is out there waiting to be discovered? This point of view on the nature of the relationship between mathematics and the physical world is called Platonism, but not everyone agrees with it. Derek Abbott, professor of electrical and electronics engineering at the University in Australia, has written a perspective piece to be published in the Proceedings of the IEEE, in which he argues that mathematical Platonism is an inaccurate view of reality. Instead, he argues for the opposing viewpoint, the non-Platonist notion that mathematics is a product of the human imagination that we tailor to describe reality. Now, I would say, in relation to flat Earth and what we've come to view as scientism, this is spot on. This is exactly,
Right.
I would say, what my position is on this. And it's being proven. You know, when NASA has to fake space, when we're constantly being deceived about, you know, what reality is based on, you know, mathematical equations, I think it's pretty clear.
Well, the simplest proof for me is I can write down 1 1/4 times 1 1/3 and hand it to somebody without modifiers. You're going to have no idea what that is.
Exactly.
You'll have no idea what it is. So it's not this, I mean, even if you're a mathematician, you wouldn't know. So what language are they actually learning? You know, if they can't understand it by looking at the shapes like we do with language.
Yes. Yeah. You know, it's a fascinating topic, and the problem is in our society right now that the people who are defining reality, the people who have been given kind of free reign in the education system, you know, they're the ones that are being taught to the youth. They're the ones that kind of sit on the pedestal, you know.
You could stretch the argument out and say math as a synthetic construct is no different than every other barrier that is placed in front of us.
Yeah.
I mean, math is supposed to be this strict, precise thing. You can't color outside the lines. You know, you just can't do it.
Yeah, like
it's not possible.
Like Neil deGrasse Tyson, like it has been quoted as saying, the good thing about science is it's true whether you believe it or not. You know, like it's in other words, it's infallible, right? And I think this is the viewpoint that people have been given about math as well, and scientism and math cannot be separated. They rely on each other completely. Okay, let's see. I'll try and pull up a video for you guys. So once again, bear with me here. And I do think it is important, if we're going to, you know, talk about these topics, we should hear from some of the people, you know, who have they have devoted their life to this stuff. There's no doubt about that.
And they think, you know, the ones who think that math does exist independently of the human being, you know.
Yes.
I would love to hear that side.
That's a really good, yeah, that's a really good point, because I think it is the whole question, because the Platonism side wants to say that math exists separately from humanity, that we've discovered it, that it was there, and it is the reality, and we're just kind of discovering it and figuring it out as we go, as if to say that the math would be anything without our involvement with it, which
Exactly.
I think is kind of absurd.
And it just doesn't pan out. I mean, math is something that was created to fill a need. It discovered, and it happened to fill this need.
Yes. Yeah, it's I think you know, it'd be more accurate to say that it is a tool that can be very useful, no doubt about that, obviously. But to try and say that it defines our reality, that it can be used to define our reality, I think is, you know,
Did it?
we're stepping into a world of hurt when we do that. And it, again, you know, I feel like what I'm dealing with Createspace is in some small way related to this topic, you
It's
know?
completely apropos.
Yeah. And it's, you know, I can't really express the amount of stress it's creating. And there's no human contact for me to solve the problem. It's a computer that only sees the number and can't see past that, and it's not going to resolve. Possibly there is no solution to it unless a human can step in and say, look, we approved the file, we understand, it's already been printed, let's just let you go. But the computer system is never going to come to that conclusion. It can't. So, you know, here we go. So I've got a little video here. I think this is a theoretical physicist named Jana Levin. She's going to kind of talk about her perspective on this.
See, I would flip that saying around.
Right.
Well, on a surface level, I could go a lot deeper philosophically, but
and that's cognitively how we're successful. So I don't look at a chair and see a huge number of molecules or some very complex structure. I see a chair. This is something that's very hard to teach a computer to do, to understand conceptual things forward, right? And we conceptualize right away. We theorize right away. I have a theory of what that object is, and my theory is that it's a chair. And that's what helps human beings be so adaptable in the world and so fast at moving through the world, and is precisely this ability to theorize and model. But we also know that by doing so, we are projecting a theory of the world on the world, and we trick ourselves. We deceive ourselves sometimes. The trick is to use the power that's given to us by being able to conceptualize and model and have metaphor, but always to remember that that's what we're doing. And to always, when you come to a point, there is in some sense no such thing as knowing something's true. It's true in the context of the model of the world that you have. And maybe there's a different model of the world where that truth is a little bit different. I mean, I'm in no position to talk about interpersonal relationships, but I think that this is a problem between people, that we have a theory of the world and things mean certain things in that context, and we forget that somebody else has a different theory of the world, and the exact same experience means something very different. As a theoretical physicist, I rely very much on calculating to understand a result. So let's say I want to know what happens when a big black hole swallows a little tiny black hole.
Here we go.
My starting point will be to think, what's my first mathematical sentence that I know if I crack it open will answer this question? Not even that step can be very hard. And then once I do that, I'll be moving in a very structured way through the steps to unlock that. But it's kind of, sometimes it's like a Rubik's Cube, which I'm actually not good at. But, you know, some people can just and solve it. And
So, yeah, I mean, I think it's enough. She has more to say, and there's some interesting stuff there, but I think, you know, she's, again, she was making a lot of sense to me, especially when she's talking about, you know, we each tend to approach our perception of everything is based on a model of the world that we have. And sometimes we forget that other people have a very different model. This is hugely apparent when it comes to the flat Earth versus spherical Earth debate, because we're talking about two groups that have wildly different models of the world, and they don't play nice together, and it's impossible. It's really impossible for a flat Earth worldview to relate to a spherical Earth worldview. I mean, you can't really reconcile the two. So
Right.
I think she makes a lot of sense there.
I go back and forth on it a little bit. Like, I don't know. It's just, was math discovered? I mean, what happened? Did somebody trip over a 2?
Right.
You
Yeah,
know?
exactly.
Did they dig it up?
And well, I think one of the classic stories or examples people give is, and I'm not going to be able to think of the name, but the golden ratio, the spiral, that was, I think somebody was working on some kind of proportion concept or figuring out proportions, and it's in nature. This golden ratio spiral is found all over the place in nature. And so this incredible number that creates this spiral, this formula, it
But
I
it
think
doesn't
that leaves
create.
a
It
lot of
doesn't
people.
create.
No, it
We
doesn't.
created a formula
Exactly. I mean, we saw something and abstracted it. Well,
to
that's the
fill a
question.
need. To fill a need. Yeah.
Exactly. So again, it's the chicken or the egg. You can argue, you can see how easy it would be for two different people to see it in a completely opposite way. And that's the problem. This is why this debate will probably never be answered. But then she starts talking about, and this is what her real job is, her real, the thing that she really works on. She starts talking about black holes and how she approaches starting with a line of math to predict or to learn more about how a black hole behaves, which is a completely theoretical entity that
Right.
nobody and nothing, we have no experience of a black hole ever. It for all intents and purposes does not exist. There is no such thing. So she lives in this worldview, this model. For her, black holes are a real thing, and she uses math to try and understand them. But how does that work?
Right.
It doesn't make any sense, because who cares if the math, you wind up with some mathematical equation that balances out or seems to whatever, work on some level.
That
It doesn't have anything to do with reality.
well that happens because as each number that doesn't work, then they begin to re-describe mentally what it is they're looking at. So they're constantly like re-describing this thing they're trying to come up with a formula until the definition and the numbers match.
Yeah,
And then they say, oh, okay, we got it right now.
exactly. And then they can plug in this, the big G. They can plug in something like a force of gravity, which is, again, completely arbitrarily contrived. It's made up, and I think it changes all the time. People just, whatever the gravity force needs to be to make an equation work, that's what it'll be.
Exactly.
And I don't think any of their stuff really works without having that little magic potion. That little bit of fairy dust of gravity. They just can, like, well, let's sprinkle some of that on there, and hey.
Well, I'm not sure if it was Einstein's relativity or another equation, but there was one he was working on, and nothing he could do would make it come out correctly. And he ended up having to invent a symbol. How does that work?
Yeah,
That doesn't
right.
make sense to me at all in any walk of life.
Yeah, I wish I had that ability, you know. That would be really helpful a lot of times. But it just has nothing to do with
Right.
reality whatsoever. So, it's interesting to me and this woman, it's highly unlikely to me that she's part of any great conspiracy. That she knows that outer
No.
space is fake, or that all of her work that she's devoted her life to. People don't devote their life's work to something that's fake. Maybe if they're offered some great sum of money, but let's face it, all of these people can't be on the payroll of the conspiracy.
Well,
That's how this works, because most of them are just going on the assumption that this is all real.
This is one of the issues I've seen in this community that bothers me, and I think people need to get away from, is because you work for so and so, or you've reached a certain status in society, you must be the bad guys. But the vast majority of them are victims too.
Agreed.
And so
yeah, I think that's it's a huge part of what we're dealing with, and what I think we should always be hyper aware of. That they're just as much of, even if they're adamantly fighting for the other side, and we could easily just say we're diehard enemies and we're going to go head to head. I think we have to understand that they are a victim in this too. Maybe more so.
I mean, they're getting the exact same information disseminated in the exact same way we are. So you have somebody who works at NASA, they're getting all their data from a computer screen, but beyond that, who knows?
Yeah.
I mean,
it's just impossible. It's impossible to think that every single person who works in the field of physics, or knows exactly that they're deceiving people or intentionally doing that. I mean, I think the only way that the whole construct of this deception works is that the majority of people have no idea.
You would have to. I mean,
yeah.
That's the very framework of doing something to this size, is you make people believe what is not true.
Yeah, and it's compartmentalized to a ridiculous degree.
Yeah.
So yeah. But again, these are just thoughts. This is just, it's an immense topic, and it's interesting. I find it fascinating, for sure.
We had to go back and loop it back around to Createspace. I mean, the more we give up the human component, is the moment we begin giving what we want. Like, you want to print the magazine this way because you know it's right, but with no human element, it's going to tell you otherwise because it's not precise, And so
exactly.
you're giving away freedom the more our world becomes automated.
Yes.
You really are. You're giving away your own personal freedom.
Yeah, I was going to move on to the next article, but I think I don't want to forget about this, what you just popped into, because it's a big part of this. And I don't think it's coincidental that the further we have delved into this reliance on computers, this sense that that some mathematical equation and digital information on a computer somewhere is going to do a good job of presenting reality back to us. And
Well, we're quickly being conditioned to think, oh, well, this has an algorithm. Whatever comes up for me is the best thing for me
right.
because of an algorithm.
So it's like, for this, let's say that this shift toward, a computer-based digital math equals reality, maybe this context might work for a certain percentage of humanity. And then it creates, maybe there's more convenience, maybe there's some kind of, they get something from it. But how many people on the flip side of that, because there's that lack of that human element has been removed to a large degree, how many people are slipping through the cracks? How many people do not function in that? Does that have anything to do with this? What it is, I'm assuming across the world, is an increase in homelessness. It's happening in the
Right.
United States at an alarming rate. I mean, where I live,
You can even use that as a metaphor. I mean, even like with anything, it might be more convenient, but you should really ask yourself, okay, I'm getting this, but anytime you give something, something gets taken away. So what are you losing?
yeah, and
And
yeah,
if you're okay, if that's a good trait for you, I don't think you're a bad person or ignorant. I mean, that was just your choice.
but there's a problem with that too, because with each successive generation, they're not getting that choice. They're being born into a pre-existing condition, right?
Right,
So
right.
it's not like they would even know the difference. And that's the power, this power that the construct we live in now has, because things have been so standardized, because there is, sorry, hold on, I'm hearing a kind of a weird echo. I'm not sure if that's coming through. Let me check. Yeah. Hold on a sec. Is people that are here, is there a strange echo happening when I'm speaking? I think it may have gone away. I think we're good. Okay. So, yeah, I think that the system, once you have control over the educational system, and you've implemented a system that has all of this standardized curriculum, and this isn't just in one country. I think every major country has taken complete control of the education, its standardized curriculum. And so how long does it really take to change humanity's worldview on something? I mean, I would think it only takes a couple of generations before you can completely shift consciousness or a way of thinking. It doesn't take that long if you're able to start people from birth.
Right.
So
or at least get it, separated far enough to where people remember it, but it just becomes like, oh, that was a silly thing we did.
Yeah, and they can push that. They can push that aspect too. They can push that narrative of it being silly, maybe not through education, But they do that with flat Earth. You know, the textbooks will
Sure.
show that classic image of the boat going over the edge.
Yeah, yeah.
So they can not only be um, indoctrinating with the exact kind of worldview they want the next generation to have, they can be mocking the worldview that they want people to stay away from. So
Right. And what's one of the biggest fears of anybody, because it's hardwired into us? None of us want to be embarrassed. So
yeah,
they teach you, if you're connected with this stuff, you're a fool and you're going to be laughed at.
right. And it, you know, I think it proves quite effective with a certain, you know, like everything. I think it, and again, we're dealing with people that they put a lot of stock in math, so it's a numbers game. They know that that's going to work with a certain amount of people. It's going to work really well. And then there's some of us who are like, you know,
Well,
wow, you're
it's
laughing at me. Wow, that really hurts. Oh,
and it's the same. I don't know. In my opinion, it's the same thing when you're having an argument, a philosophical debate with somebody, and they come back with the answer like, "Well, the Bible says so." Oh, okay. Well, all
yeah,
right. I guess it must be true. So that's what math has become, is you can be arguing something with somebody, and even though they can't explain the math, their answer is inevitably, well, because of physics. Wait, what?
yeah. It's like that. Oh, well, shoot, you're right. Well, I guess that's over. I'm glad we can put that on the
That's
shelf.
it.
The end.
Physics. Well, throwing that word around.
Exactly. Let's see. So there's this other article here. This is the one from Forbes. Does math really exist? In the midst of a rather interesting discussion of the notion of Aristotle's unmoved mover, Leah Libresco went on a mild digression about the philosophy of mathematics that I couldn't let go of and feel compelled to respond to. She says, I take what is apparently a very Platonist position on math. There it is again. So obviously, you know, Plato is an absolutely huge probably the biggest factor in all of this, if the timeline on all of this is to be taken at face value.
Sure.
I don't treat it as the relationships that humans make between concepts we abstract from day-to-day life. I don't think I get the concept of two-ness from seeing two apples and then two people and then two houses and abstracting away from the objects to see what they have in common. I think of mathematical truths existing prior to human cognition and abstraction. The relationship goes the other way. The apples and the people and the houses are all similar insofar as they share in the form of two-ness, which exists independently of material things to exist in pairs or human minds to think about them. The notion that there's something special about math, that it has some sort of metaphysical significance, only makes sense if you ignore the history of how we uncovered math to begin with. It was, despite Leah's protestations, exactly just the abstraction of pairs and triplets and quartets, etc. The earliest known mathematics appear to be attempts to quantify time and make calendars, with other early efforts directed towards accounting, astronomy, and engineering. Mathematics is nothing more and nothing less than a tool that's useful for humans in solving particular problems. Math can be used to describe reality or construct useful fictions. For example, we know now that the space-time we live in is non-Euclidean. But that doesn't make Euclidean geometry useless for everyday life. Quite the contrary, it's used every day. You can use mathematics to build models of reality that may not actually have any bearing on what's real. Exactly. For example, the complicated math used to describe how the planets move in the not even going to try to say that, model of the solar system, where everything orbited in circles around the Earth, actually produced very accurate predictions. But it was also wrong. There aren't actually trillions of physical dollars circulating in the economy. There are just symbols for them floating around. The bottom line is that human beings have brains capable of counting to high numbers and manipulating them, so we use mathematics as a useful tool to describe the world around us. But numbers and math themselves are no more real than the color blue. Blue is just what we tag a certain wavelength of light because of the way we perceive that wavelength. An alien intelligence, hardy-har, that is blind has no use for the color blue. It might learn about light and the wavelengths of light and translate those concepts completely differently than we do. So, you know, again, I think that this article clearly points out that yes, math is an incredibly useful tool, and it, you know, it always has been.
It's an essential tool. I mean, for us as humanity, that's why we created something to fill that need, to be able to explain and measure and build.
Yeah.
You know.
But,
so we had to come up with a structure.
Right. But to expect it to take it to that next level that
right.
theoretical physicists are trying to do now, and say that we can construct all of reality using nothing but math, or even go so far as to say that all of reality is math. It's reducible to math. It's all just math.
Yeah.
You know, and this is
everything.
This is what they're trying to tell us. This is what they want us to accept, and they've been pushing for it for quite some time, and they've been pretty successful at convincing a lot of people. You know.
Right. I mean, it's the core foundation of our entire educational system, math.
Yeah.
You know, and it's right.
Let's, you know, let's skip over philosophy and just teach that math can basically answer all the tough questions for us, you know.
Right.
And I think one without the other is absolutely, you know, it's ridiculous. And there's this, I found this guy, his YouTube channel, he goes by Wasp, and I think he has a great delivery, but he really tears apart this concept of, you know, this idea that the universe is made of math, you know, and that's really what they're driving at. So I wanted to, I gotta share this video. Okay, here we go. Going to start talking.
The name of this argument is of course a reference to the hard problem of consciousness, and the argument is similar as well. There is an unbridgeable gap between math and physical objects. You cannot identify what math any physical object is reducible to. If an electron is made of math, you should be able to state what math it is made of, but this has never been done and obviously cannot be done. There isn't even anywhere to begin with how one would go about this. Max Tegmark has given it a shot, and of course he failed miserably. He literally just wrote down some numbers, thinking he had at the very least described an electron. But of course with those numbers alone, you would know nothing about what an electron is. You have to mention the physical properties being described, and you cannot replace those with numbers. Notice that what Tegmark is doing isn't even an attempt at showing how an electron is made of numbers. All he's demonstrating is the role of numbers in a description of an electron. Never mind that his description is shit, because a description of an electron isn't identical to an electron anyway. If you open up a physics book, you might find a meaningful description of an electron. But that section of a book isn't an electron, it's just words on a page. To this, Tegmark or some other moron might say that they're talking about a description in a Platonic or abstract sense. But how does that help? You still just have a description, all you did was get rid of the paper. So now that your description resides in the abstract realm, where it is made of nothing, it's supposed to be identical to an electron? How retarded do you have to be to say this? Writing down the description of an electron on a sheet of paper didn't make an electron, but if only the words were written down outside of space, then we'd have it.
As I already mentioned, abstract objects don't have the right properties to take the place of physical objects. For instance, abstract objects don't fucking take up space. It just takes space to write the arbitrary symbols we made up to represent them with.
The only bearing a purely mathematical truth has on a world is that it cannot be contradicted by anything in that world. That's it. But if everything is reducible to math, then purely mathematical knowledge shouldn't leave you clueless as to what the actual world is like. Given an infinite amount of purely mathematical truths, would you know that unicorns don't exist, but dogs do? No. Would you know any of the laws of physics? No. How could you? The laws of physics are not purely mathematical. They show a mathematical relationship between things that are irreducibly physical. For example, mass is a physical property. It is not a mathematical object or a property of any mathematical object. You cannot formulate any law of physics using only mathematical objects.
Okay. Yeah, again, I posted a link to this video in the chat, which will of course take you, you'll be able to explore his channel further. He goes by Wasp. I just love his dry, no-nonsense delivery, you know. And he just calls it what it is. And I mean, I completely agree with the sentiment. I think you get to a point where it just feels like such a cartoon that they're trying to pass. What they're trying to pass off as reality, all of this mythology that NASA and physicists are creating with these mathematical equations. It's such a cartoon. It's such a joke, and the thing, even if math is just integrated into what this place is, whether it's a creation. Whatever this existence is, if math has just always existed and we indeed discovered it, even if that's the case, it's still been created and integrated for us to discover, and it's meaningless without our interaction with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, if what I'm getting from what you're saying is if math does indeed exist independently of us, in order for it to be truly useful. I mean, it's this organic thing. Math would be an organic thing that constantly grew, and we would have to grow with it.
Yeah, I mean, if it's part of the experience here, if it's part of whatever this is, whether it's some kind of testing ground where we're supposed to learn something, or whatever your stance is on it, I think the important thing is that you can't just separate math from human beings and say they exist separately. I don't think they can exist without one another.
Well, wouldn't let's take it this way real quick. I mean, if math was indeed if math was discovered, to me, that would infer, and I think you touched on this, that it was placed there by something.
Yes.
Because how did that come about with the Big Bang? Are they going to say the Big Bang created math, is responsible for math?
Well, of course, that's what they're suggesting about everything. No matter how complex the construct of something, of life in general, of anything, it's all just a cosmic accidents anyway. So why not?
Really,
why wouldn't math be able to be part of that absurd storyline?
So I mean, atheists then should actually really believe that math was a synthetic construct that we created.
I think that would make more sense, yeah.
Yeah.
But, you know, as quantum physics and astrophysics starts to blur the line with New Age thinking, with this kind of spiritual New Age thinking, it's kind of the opposite of what's happening. You know, atheists are kind of seeing math as almost a divine thing. You know, it's replacing. They're basically trading in, you know, the idea of a creator for this divine math as representative of God itself.
But they don't think of it in those terms. They would say, no, that's not what we're doing.
Maybe not. They might not think that's what they think, but that's where they're being led, in my opinion.
Right. Sure, whether that's what's happening or not, that's not their perception of it, you know?
Sure.
I mean, even though that it may be the exact reverse very deep down, you know, I mean, on an inherent level.
Yeah. There's a channel called, I'm sure a lot of people here know of it, Truth is Stranger Than Fiction. He dives into these topics all the time, and especially is concerned with, you know, the New Age, transhumanist, all of this way of thinking that is so prevalent right now, and it's really become such a part of the physics, the quantum physics angle. You can't really, at this point, you can't separate that kind of New Age thinking, I don't think, from what scientism is pushing right now.
Well, and it's funny when you think about every math, every single equation does something for us. You would think, you know, I mean, it's an ego thing. Math could be considered this ego thing.
Right.
I mean, it's all very self-involved and about us getting to greater heights, as it were.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. I forgot I had this little slide. You know, what good is a discussion on the role of mathematics in our perceived reality if you don't bring Einstein into it? And this quote it just confuses the hell out of me. As far as the laws of mathematics refer to reality, they are not certain. And as far as they are certain, they do not refer to reality.
See, that's a great quote.
Yeah.
The way I read that is,
please share.
He's saying exactly what we're talking about.
I think so too. But is he?
You know, he's saying, you know, you can come up with a mathematical equation that makes something certain, but that in no way reflects reality.
Yeah.
That's exactly what he's saying.
I was fairly certain that that's what he was saying too, but I wasn't sure if he had cleverly structured it in such a way that it became a double negative.
Yeah, like a double entendre thing.
Yeah.
I don't read it that way, and regardless of what all you guys think of Albert Einstein, whoever wrote that quote, that's a really, really good quote.
It's strong. And
Yeah.
if it means what I'm pretty sure it means and what you think it means, I certainly agree with it.
Yeah.
You know, we
Yep.
just should not be looking to math to tell us what reality is. Now, can we use math to reinforce observable reality? To then reinforce it, and so we can use that as a tool? Yeah, certainly. And it's done
I
all
mean,
the time with engineering
that's
and
what it was
whatever.
created for. That was it. That's what it was created for.
Exactly. But they've removed it from its purpose and given it this divine role, and
Right.
now they can just say, I'm going to use this. I'm going to use math to create black holes and tell you how they function, even though we've never seen, experienced, even though they do not exist. I mean, they do not exist. Not not in any way that we've been told. If there is even anything close to a black hole, which I doubt, what they're presenting to us with the math of a black hole is completely absurd.
Right.
So, yeah, I thought that was a pretty cool little slide. I think I found this other interesting. It was a poster for an event that I found that I thought was kind of interesting. So, modeling reality with mathematics. This was, a talk that somebody gave, and it is not the reality that we see, but the perception of reality that we recognize as real. And I think it was just that little bit on there that really struck me, because
Right.
therein lies the problem. And
Right.
this is becoming more and more true all the time, is that the reality, it has nothing to do with the reality we see. It's about this perception of a reality. And that's what's becoming real to people, is a perception of reality that's being presented to them over and over and over again through education, entertainment, constant reinforcement through mainstream mediums. And so
So
perception has become real.
do you think there's even a fix for that? I mean, especially coming off the math topic. I mean, how do you even address the math topic? I mean, can that even change?
Well, yeah, this is something it keeps coming up. In a lot of, whenever I'm part of a talk, it seems to be a relevant thing that I hit on. Because it works both ways. If they've been able to take control of an educational system, and over the course of a couple generations can change humanity's perception of what reality is, that means that it can be done in reverse, doesn't it? I mean, it's feasible to me that in two generations we could do it again, is what I'm saying.
I think the problem, and just going off like the language that you use, we can do it in reverse. I think there's been this perception created, though, that these past generations, as they're changing, what they're doing is evolving for the better. So that's the narrative, right?
Of course.
So now you have to like escape multiple shackles. Like now you have to change your perception to think that going back isn't a de-evolution.
Yes.
Does
Of course,
that make
that
sense?
would be key. But again, if we're in a position as humanity to make that, and I would hope it would be kind of a group decision, I don't. The last thing we want is to go to do this whole thing over again, where it's all like forced on people. But if say flat Earth is capable of reaching enough people, and suddenly there's a tipping point, and humanity demands that we do away with what's currently being taught, and that we start teaching reality. And once that decision is made by humanity, I think if you start from birth, if you start with a new generation from the time they're children, and you give them the opportunity to learn about reality in that way, and the other thing isn't even, it's just not even present. I mean, why even bring it into, maybe if you want to teach it as some quaint mythology that was taught to people before, maybe, but why even bother with that even? I mean, let's just move forward. Wipe the slate clean and let a new generation start with a real foundation, a real understanding of where it is they live and where it is and maybe then they could figure out where it is they want to go. You know? But that's just a thought. I like to think that if it's been done to us, and I think it's been done in a relatively, I don't think it's taken nearly as long. I don't think the flat earth thing has been settled for 500 years. I think that's a total lie. And they keep trying to push that back. Like, oh no, that the Greeks had the globe model too, and it keeps going further and further back. But I think actual widespread acceptance of the heliocentric model is a very recent phenomenon, and it is a topic we want to jump into soon. So I think if that's something that could have been pushed on humanity in a relatively short amount of time, then it can be the same for another viewpoint or another way of looking at the world. Why not?
And you don't think there's more like accumulated crap that you have to strip off the further we go? So it stands to reason that it's going to take longer to reverse everything you've learned.
Well, but a child doesn't have any of that. The child doesn't have anything unless it's put on them. That's what I'm saying. If we're able to start over with a new generation, and it's a concerted effort and decision by humanity to move in a new direction, which I mean, if flat Earth isn't about this, then what is it about? I think that's what we're all kind of seeking. You know.
Right.
So, I mean, what would you need to scrape away? What buildup would there be for a new generation of children that haven't been taught any of this?
Right, but I mean, you would have to take, like, the focus would have to be on the people raising those children.
That's true.
Like, they're the ones that are going to have to shed the accumulated weight.
That's why it takes probably 2, maybe 3
generations.
Yeah. I don't think it can be done in one because, the residue of the people who grew up with the old way of thinking are going to have a tough time. And they might even fight it aggressively and not want their children to be part of the new way of thinking. So, I think it takes 2 to 3 generations.
It's like going to the beach, and then you go home and you're finding sand in your shoes weeks later, no matter how much you clean, I mean, right. It takes that much sweeping.
Yeah. I tell you, I mean, I think we delved into a lot of stuff. I didn't get through, I probably only got through 50% of what I had lined up, but I think we hit on a lot of good points. But we didn't scratch the surface. This topic is huge.
Yeah.
It's a big one. And I think the real danger of where we're at and where we're headed right now is that we are removing the human component to so much of what we do, so much of our interactions. And I'm feeling it with Createspace, and that's just this tiny little thing. But it's happening in so many sectors of our lives where the human component is being reduced or completely eliminated. So
right.
I don't see anything positive about that direction.
Well, what's ironic about this is you and I are really reclusive. We don't want to be around people, and I agree with you. There's not one single good thing that is going to come out of the full automation of our daily lives. There's nothing. It's only going to get worse.
Right. And yeah, and that's interesting. You bring up the point that we tend to be we're isolated people by default, but even we could recognize that. I mean, it's so obvious,
Yeah,
you know.
it's the same thing that what I'm doing editing a flat earth magazine when I'm not a flat earther. You know, it's the idea of it is what's important. You know, what it actually means.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, I think I really enjoyed this one. It's a really intense topic. It's
Yeah,
kind of, bottom line.
fascinating.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll hit on it again. I'd like to.
I think you have to like you wouldn't even have you don't have to. It's just like this topic is so encompassing that you have to talk about it with other topics. I mean, they're
Yeah,
just so integrated.
it's just such a huge component of why we find ourselves where we are right now, with the population that believes in a fantasy about outer
Right.
space and all of this. I mean, it's how we got here. So clearly, it's a huge topic for flat Earth to be engaging. And like you said, how do we figure out how to convince people that this isn't the evolution you're looking for? This isn't gonna take you to the next level. This way of thinking,
Right.
quite the opposite. It's leading you to a place where you're gonna be empty, meaningless, and have no human connection. You know.
Right.
Um, so yeah, for those that weren't here at the beginning, um, we're experiencing difficulty with Createspace. I had to resubmit an interior file to make a necessary fix. I'm still dealing with Createspace. They keep rejecting my file. I'm trying to resolve it as quickly as possible, but again, the human element just isn't there. I'm dealing with an automated system. And mostly all I can do is keep guessing what the problem is and resubmitting it and hoping. It's like rolling the dice, I feel like, at this point, because it was already accepted. So now it's just like, okay, maybe it's a percentage chance. Maybe I'll just keep submitting it, the same file over and over, and eventually it'll get accepted, which would be an interesting
Like
experiment.
like their algorithm or whatever has a quota percent
Yeah,
of how many files they need to reject
it
a
could
certain
be.
amount of times because they're trying to get you to pay for professional help. I guarantee that's
Yes,
what it is.
I
I
think
guarantee.
so. It got rejected several times initially, too. But
Right.
I felt like there maybe were some valid issues in those ones. But now it's like
Because
I
most
know there's no problem because I'm holding a copy in my hand, right? I can hold it. It's already been printed.
most people trying to do this, maybe they're doing like some cute project for their family. They're going to get frustrated and have no choice but to call and pay for help.
Yeah.
And that's the whole business model.
Yeah, they're just waiting. It's like the starting price for pro services through them is $199. So that's what
And,
I'm sure if I paid them $199 today, the magazine would be available for sale tomorrow.
right.
I'm
Right.
sure, and it probably wouldn't require any changes to the file. Is the
Right.
real issue. So yeah, it could be that. It wouldn't surprise me. But we're going to get it resolved. It's a bump in the road. Um, the big thing is, we're working on issue number 2 already, and if anyone's listening to this, anyone or someone who would like to speak to this topic that we talked about, about math
Yeah.
trumping reality, it's something we want in the magazine. If someone
Well,
can,
and
yeah, go ahead.
No, I mean, that would be great. I mean, even aside from that, if you're an artist, you're a writer, let's get you published. Let's show the work of the community. We need submissions.
Yeah, we really do. I mean, I think when I first jumped into this, and both of us jumped into this, there was a sense that we might be overwhelmed with submissions just because there wasn't a print outlet for people in this community. But
Yeah.
I think looking at it differently than any other publication that I've been involved with, that probably was a mistake because it's always difficult initially getting the ball rolling on submissions to a new publication. That's just how it is. And that's it, and it's no different with Flat Revival magazine.
And
we've got great content coming in. We've got Crow77 has his ongoing column. Flat Earth Smarts has his ongoing column. Spiritual North is coming back. This time it's not an interview. He's writing something completely on his own. I can't wait to see that. Polly Hart's coming back in with his ongoing sci-fi series. Of course, Louis doing his Between Two Worlds column. So, oh yeah, and then Next Gen Flat Earthers with Jacob Applebaum. Go find the others. He's gonna really start diving into the whole parenting as a flat earther issue. So we've already, I mean, a lot of great stuff is already going on, and the cover to issue #2 has already been decided. It's really cool.
and I mean, real quick before I've got to bounce, but submissions, until we let everybody know, we're always open for submissions, always. I mean, at one point we're hoping we'll get so many we will have to close submissions,
right,
through certain dates, but as of right now, if you have something you want to submit it anytime.
Exactly. That's exactly right. I mean, we are open, and it doesn't matter whether it's written or art or a combination of the two. Go out on a limb and do something. It just, send it to us, and we want to see what you can come up with.
Even if people have an idea but they don't know how to go about doing it, get in touch with us, and maybe we'll love the idea and we can work with you to get that actualized.
That's a really good point. Yeah, indeed. And I've invited some people here probably are aware of the Sun and Moon group, and it looks likely that we're going to get something from them for issue #2. And however you feel about what they're doing, it's really intensive research. It's fascinating stuff. So we're just trying to get as many different perspectives, as many people as we can, and minds involved in this thing as possible. And we're really excited about the direction #2 is taking. It's really cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, hey Becky G, just saw you in the chat. Sorry, I've been really consumed in this topic. Becky G has 2 pieces of really great art in issue 1. Really appreciate being able to use that art. It's beautiful. So yeah, thanks everybody for joining us. I hope we did some justice to this topic. It's probably a bigger topic than I was really prepared to tackle today, but I think we got a good start on it, and maybe we can do this again with maybe a couple more guests and really dig into it deeper.
Yeah, we'll need to. I mean, it's hard to imagine you'll ever be able to come up with an answer to any of this with this topic, but it's important to, I think, to contemplate it and discuss it.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks everybody for being here, and thank you, Becky. I just saw that. I'm glad you got your copy. See, the magazine's printed. It's in people's hands. So we'll get it. We'll make that issue available again soon. at some point Createspace has to give. So we'll keep you updated on that. And thanks for being here.
Thanks.